and welcome to the next of our studies in End Times for Beginners. The study in this session is called the Four Horsemen. We're going to look at the opening of the seals. We saw the scene being set in heaven in our previous study. We saw John getting adjusted to being in spirit, being outside of the limitations of his body and also outside the limitations of earth time, able by the Spirit of God to be moved around and see things in heaven from when and where God wanted him to see them. We're going to see now that as the Lamb who has taken the book because he is worthy and sits upon the throne and begins to open in order each of the seals on the scroll and unroll a section, that as he examines the title deeds that have been repurchased by the blood of the Lamb, then there will come judgment on planet Earth for their rebellion and also for their refusal of the message of Jesus, and also for their persecution of the people who trusted Jesus and the Word of God. And that will increase right down until the very end of the tribulation period. They will not appreciate and understand, because they will be controlled and deceived by the dragon, that the more they turn aside from God, the more they turn away from the Word of God, and the more they persecute the people of God, the more anger they will produce in the heart of God, and the more righteous judgment that God will pour out upon them. We'll see that even in our study in this video. Let's read in the book of Revelation in chapter number 6. John says, I saw. You remember that when John said, I saw, it's got nothing to do with a change in time. It's got to do with something new that John saw in his vision, things that he had never seen before. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the four living ones saying, Come. And I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow. And the victor's crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. And when he, that is the Lamb, had opened the second seal, I heard the second living one say, Come. And there went out another horse that was red, and it was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. When he had opened the third seal, I heard the third living one say, Come. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard the voice in the midst of the living ones say, A measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that you don't hurt the oil and the wine. And when he'd opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living one say, Come. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, a sickly coloured horse. And his name that sat on him, Death, and Hades followed with him. And authority was given unto them over a quarter of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. We leave it there. We know that God blesses even these very strange and judgmental readings of his prophetic word. John is in heaven, and he has set the scene for us in chapters 4 and 5. The Lamb is on the throne, and the first of the judgments of God, controlled from heaven but worked out on earth, are about to commence. We will see in our studies there are 7 seal judgments. And then we will see that there are 7 trumpet judgments. And then we'll see a little further on there are 7 bowl judgments. I don't think we'll develop this as we go forward. I don't think that it is 7 plus 7 plus 7, like 3 little train carriages all lined up, 21 judgments in a row. I think in the 3 sets of judgment that John sees depicted, there is a little bit of overlap in time. But the emphasis falls in a certain place. If we take the 7-year judgment period and divide it absolutely in the center, because the Bible does that, and Revelation does that, and John does that, and prophecy does that. The 7-year period is split exactly down the center. 1,260 days, 42 months, 3.5 years. We'll see that in the seal judgments, the weight of them come here. But I do believe that when we get to the last one in our study today, it will still reach to here, the end of the 7 years. The trumpet judgments perhaps come a little bit later than the beginning of the seal judgments, but they conclude here. And the bowl judgments, although the emphasis of the pouring out of the bowls is upon the kingdom of Antichrist the beast, of course they will intensify until their conclusion, which is here. And so we will see that seals, trumpets and bowls, controlled by the authority of the Lamb on the throne, they all have their conclusion at the end of judgment here. And of course that will bring in a period of peace, which will last for 1,000 years. Those 2 things that I have just said are very closely connected, because we saw in our reading that the first horse that appears is a white horse. And when Jesus, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, comes in Revelation chapter 19, at the end of judgment to set up his peace kingdom, he will come on a white horse. Are these 2 people the same? Some people actually have suggested so. I think the Bible is clear, not so. This man is a false Messiah, a false Christ. This man has no name whatsoever, even though he comes with other horses linked with him. There's no name given to him. He is an impostor. This one who comes on his horse in Revelation 19 has got 4 different names all given at once. He is identified over and over again as to who he is. He is the King of Kings and he is the Lord of Lords. Are the horses literal? That's a good question. I think that in relation to the white horses, they could be. You remember that Joseph, when he was elevated to government in Egypt, he was allowed to ride in the 2nd chariot. You remember that Haman, an enemy of the Jews, and a picture of this man here, he wanted to see all the Jews destroyed, but he thought that he could get to ride upon the king's horse in the city. That was literal. Jesus, the Messiah, when he came to Jerusalem the first time to fulfill Zechariah 9:9, came lowly riding upon a colt. That was literal. I think when he comes the 2nd time, himself, not the impostor, but the true Christ. Psalm 24, the gates of the city will be lifted up. He will come riding upon his war horse as the true Messiah, as the Son of David, as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, to set up a peace kingdom that will last for 1,000 years. This man is a false Messiah. This man is a false Christ. This man is against Christ. This man is antichrist. This man is an impostor. But he comes on a white horse. And he comes wearing a crown. Not a regal crown, but a victor's crown. He comes with a bow, but there's no arrows mentioned. I think the suggestion is he does not need to fight a war, because other kings will give their authority and maybe even their crowns to him. There might even be a great literal ceremony of handing over. Maybe something like some of the ceremonies that they've had in years gone past in London City in relation to the monarchy in the United Kingdom. Maybe kings will actually come and they will ceremonially put their crowns upon the head of this man and say, we have given him our authority. We're going to rule with him, but he will be the super king. He will be the peacemaker. He will be the head one over us. He will conquer without a war. White is the colour not only of peace, but white is also the colour of surrender. You remember in war stories and battle stories, if someone waved a white flag, it meant no shooting anymore because we are surrendering. He maybe doesn't need to fight a war because all of those in the territory that he's interested in, not the whole world. He will have enemies in the north that he will not conquer. He will have enemies in the east that he will not conquer. But as far as the West and the Middle East is concerned, it seems to be they will give their authority and power to him. And what he'll do is he'll say, I'm going to have a test case. I'm going to prove my power and authority and capabilities, which of course will come from the dragon. I'm going to take the biggest single difficulty historically on planet Earth, the lack of peace between the Jew and the Arab and in the Middle East. I'm going to sort the Jewish problem, the anti-Semitic problem. I'm going to sort the Islam problem. I'm going to sort the peace difficulty in the Middle East between Israel and Iran and her neighbours. And when I sort that out, and Israel can stand down her army and live in peace because I will make them all sign a 7-year peace treaty, you will see the kind of man that I am, and you'll want me to rule over as much of the world as possible. He'll come as a false Messiah. He'll come as a false peacemaker. And he will make a 7-year peace treaty. That's in Daniel chapter number 9, but it will be a false peace. It will be broken very soon after, not by him. He will break it himself. He will break the peace treaty with Israel when it suits him in the center point of the 7-year period. But I don't think even his peace will last very long, because there are other enemies that have not given their power to him. The second horse we read about was not white, it was red. And the weapon of the shadowy person on this horse is a great sword. That speaks of close quarter battle. I wonder, as all the nuclear warfare and long distance missiles, I wonder does something happen to all of that? I know that John wouldn't have understood those things if he had seen them in his vision, and maybe he did. We'll see that in further studies. But I wonder, in this 7 terrible year period that's going to come, will things have happened? That fighting and warfare will go back to huge armies, land movement, and hand-to-hand swords and spears and shields and bows and arrows. I don't know, I'm not sure. But this horse changes from white to red, and it changes from peace to warfare. And there is great blood shed. And then John says, I saw when the third horse was called forth, it's all controlled by the Lamb opening seals in heaven. And John said he doesn't appear to have a weapon, the shadowy figure on this horse. He appears to be carrying something very strange, an old-fashioned set of weighing scales. Not the scales of justice, the scales of weighing food. When I was a young fellow, I used to go to the old-fashioned grocery store, and you would have asked for a pound of this and 2 pounds of that, and 10 slices of bacon and 6 slices of ham. And the man behind the counter with a nice brown coat on, he wrapped it all up and put it in brown paper, and you took it home to your mother. No pre-packaging, no plastic, and not going to the big supermarket and getting the meat and cheese and stuff that came from the other side of the world. It was local. And so this person on this horse is going to have a set of weighing scales. John says, I heard a voice saying that 1 measure of wheat it will take a full day's wages to buy it. 3 measures of barley, it will take a full day's wages to buy that. And you combine the two together and you make a kind of rough loaf. And that feeds your family for Monday. But all your wages have been used up. Nothing for milk, nothing for meat, nothing for rent, nothing for clothes. You go back to work again on Tuesday. At the end of the day, you get paid, and on the way home, you get weighed out your grain, and you go home and you bake a rough loaf, and you cut it up, and you feed your family bread and water. John said that's what's going to come even before the middle of this 7-year period. Then he says a strange thing. The voice from heaven said, don't hurt the oil and the wine. I think that's telling us that the poverty and famine will be amongst the poor. But the rich and the landowners and the high members of society will not be affected by the poverty that's in the rest of the world. That's solemn, and it speaks very loudly about things that are not very far away. John says then, because of war and because of famine, I saw a 4th horse. It's not a pale horse, that's not the right word. It's, some translations say, a sickly coloured horse. The original word actually comes into English as the word cholera, an old-fashioned disease which comes from bad sanitation and contaminated water. It's connected with people who have become refugees. Millions have moved because of war in their territory, and fresh water is in short supply, and stored water becomes contaminated, and all those other things, and there are outbreaks. It happened in India a long time ago after wars over there, and millions of people died in one outbreak of cholera. John tells us that by the end of this period, not even halfway through the 7 years, by the pestilence and disease and warfare and bloodshed and beasts. I don't think that that's lions and tigers. I think it's tiny beasts, the mosquitoes, and the little fleas that carry disease in different parts of the world and can be carried in people's clothing and can be carried in their luggage and can be spread by other animals that are larger and come so easily and kill millions of people, even as malaria still does in the continent of Africa today. John says by the pestilence and the disease and the beasts and the warfare and the famine, 1/4 of the population of planet Earth was rubbed out. That's 2 billion at today's numbers. That will happen by the judgments of the Lamb opening the seas. And we haven't even got to the middle point of the 7-year period. John says, I saw when the 5th seal was opened. We didn't read that in our reading. John said, I saw martyrs in heaven. That's what the passage means. And they're asking for vengeance from God upon their enemies. And the Spirit of God says to them, just wait a little bit longer, because there are many more who have to be martyred. But there will come an end of all martyrdom. There will be the last soul, Jew or Gentile, who gives his life for the testimony of Jesus Christ. I can tell you exactly when it will come. It will come at the very end of that 7-year period. And when we all go into the peace period of 1,000 years of the kingdom of Jesus Christ, there will not be one person ever have to give their life for the testimony of Jesus Christ again. That's an amazing thought, isn't it? Such a comfort to those who are being persecuted even today. God will bring vengeance, but God will also bring a period of peace. In his perfect peacemaker, the Shiloh who will come, Genesis 49, and he will bring a period where there cannot be persecution of the people of God again. John said when the Lamb opened the 6th seal, there came down on earth a tremendous earthquake. There are 5 earthquakes in the book of Revelation, but I think this one is actually the same as the last one, so I think there are actually 4. I think that when we come to this earthquake, at the 6th seal, we actually have reached almost the very end of the 7-year period. John said, when the earthquake happened, after all these other things, the kings, those who thought that this man was going to sort the world's problems, the kings and the mighty men and the rulers and the governors and the rich men, the one who weren't affected by the famine, they're going to rush into caves and holes in the ground. And they're going to pray for the first time, and they're going to pray a very strange prayer, and it won't be answered. They're going to pray to the rocks. They're going to say, fall on us and hide us from the face of the Lamb. They'll know what's happening. They'll believe the Bible when it is too late. They'll stop being atheists when it is too late. They'll say, hide us from the face of the Lamb, because his wrath has come, and who will be able to stand before him? And the answer is none, except those who have put faith in Jesus Christ, and none of those who have trusted in this Superman or worshipped him in the days that will happen in the second half of the 7-year period, and worship the dragon, Satan, the devil, the evil one, who is behind him. John said, we didn't read it, we have to turn over another chapter to find it. John says when he had opened the 7th seal, that comes at the beginning of chapter number 8, John said there was a half-hour silence in heaven. You say, is that symbolic or literal? I think it's literal. I think that all the numbers in the Bible are literal. Hours, days, months, years can mean periods, comparative periods. An hour shorter than a day shorter than a month, and a month shorter than a year. But when a number is taken and attached to it, then it becomes literal. 7 days becomes 7 days. 42 months becomes 42 months. 3.5 years becomes 3.5 years. 1,260 days becomes 3.5 years. Those numbers are all the same. And I think when it says half an hour, 30 minutes, I think that's what it means. For a half-hour period of earth time. You remember, in a great many different places in the world, when I was a little fellow at school, it used to be much more closely observed than now. We used to have an old radio in my classroom, a crackly kind of thing. And the teacher put the news on at certain times and twiddled with the knobs. I always remember that in November, not the 5th, no, the 11th day and the 11th hour, the 11th minute, and everybody in class was told to stand up and be silent. There would be an announcement on the radio in the whole school. The janitor and the teachers and all the pupils, right down to kindergarten class, they would all be silent for 1 minute. And we were told to remember all the people that had given their lives in all the wars, that we might have peace and freedom. Not only freedom from war, but freedom to exercise our faith in Jesus Christ. Those are some of the freedoms that wars in the past were fought for. We're forgetting that in the day in which we're living. I think that this 30-minute silence is not looking back. I think it's looking forward. Heaven knows just how terrible the judgments of the Lamb are still to be. The trumpets are just about to be blown by the servant angels, and the bowls are just about to be poured by the angel messengers, and the end of God's judgment upon planet Earth is just about to come. And the last 3.5 years are going to be so terrible that Jesus said unless they were shortened in time, no flesh would be saved. And heaven is silent for half an hour, thinking about the judgment that is just to come. I think on that note, that solemn note, we'd leave it there for this study. Then we'll come on the next study and look at the trumpet judgments and see what is going to happen there. Some questions for the younger people that you can consider for your homework, and I appreciate all those that are writing in with answers, and I would ask that more of you would do it. ENDTIMESforBEGINNERS@gmail.com. Can you give me the colour of the horses and put them in the right order? That's not so hard to do because you can copy it off the picture of the chart. How many seals were opened in our study today? What happened when the 6th seal was opened? What strange thing did the kings and the great men do, and what did they say? Who is it that they said they wanted to hide from? Who do you think? You can write a little description here. Who do you think is the rider on the white horse? And why do you think his horse is white? That will do for the questions and the answers in our study today, and may God bless you and give you understanding in these solemn things that we have been looking at together.